Hi, and welcome to Season 2 of the Team Deakins Podcast, a collection of informal conversations between Roger and James Deakins and a guest. We never know where the conversation will take us, so listen in and see where it goes. This episode is sponsored by Aperture and its new Storm XT52, the industry's most powerful LED point source light. Brighter than a 6K HMI and powered by Aperture's revolutionary Blair light engine, the Storm XT52 is both a tunable white light and also the brightest ever adjustable color LED. Storm XT52, unrivaled output, only from Aperture. This episode is sponsored by Sandstorm, the Technodolly specialist now based at Ealing Studios in London. The Technodolly is a fully repeatable camera crane and motion control in one, allowing cinematographers to handcraft a shot and then repeat it instantly and frame accurately for visual effects. Find them on Instagram and YouTube at sandstorm_films. Today we're speaking to a cinematographer. Among his credits are Moonlight, If Beale Street Could Talk, and Mufasa, The Lion King. We're pleased to welcome James Laxton. James, thank you for doing this.
Well, thank you both very, very much. It's an honor to be here. I really appreciate it.
So we want to start with a question that only you can answer, which is, how did you get to where you are today? Did you always want to be a cinematographer? Did you have other plans first and then figure it out?
I was interested to read that your mother is a well-known costume designer.
Yeah, that's right.
And I wondered, did that attract you to the business or put you off? Yeah.
I mean, definitely both in probably multiple ways. But yeah, that's right. So I sort of learned about what this sort of business is or industry is, as a child. What my sort of spring breaks and Christmas vacations and summer vacations as a kid in school would be spent traveling to go see where mom was working for the summer or whatever it might be. And I remember, vividly, I'm going to sort of guess the age, but it's probably somewhere around 9, 10, started to sort of see an excitement around those places. I don't think it would be, it would have been too early for me to say I was attracted to the idea of storytelling or even sort of what even images might be. But I think it was probably more than anything else, just the sheer sort of excitement and energy surrounds a film set. As a child, I think that was sort of infectious. And again, by no means at that moment in my life did I ever think that's what I wanted to be doing as a career, because when you're that age, you care about nothing besides what toy you're playing with and what your friends are doing. But I think it was probably just an excitement about what was, the energies that were surrounding the set, the quietness, the stillness, but also the sort of precision that people were focused at and things like that. So I think that kind of, built into a trend towards my interest in it, at that early age. But again, I don't mean to imply that it had anything to do with cinematography at all. It was just purely an interest in that in some sort of basic sense. And then, I think, I grew up so I was born in 1981. I would have sort of become a teenager in the mid-90s. And at that point, video cameras were starting to become a thing where family events were recorded on video. And I was making little videos with friends on the side, like skate videos and things like that. And so I think my mom's sort of world trending with sort of the timing of my upbringing and cameras becoming a little bit of an interest in some level, probably those two things combining started me down a certain path towards, I think at this point, being a cinematographer, but by no means at that age was this specific thing entertaining, being entertained. But yeah.
And you went to film school, right?
I did.
I mean, when did you make that decision to do that?
Yeah. So I did go to film school. I went to film school in Florida at Florida State University. And I think that was probably an odd choice, I guess, looking back, only in the sense of I grew up in California. And, why not choose UCLA or all the schools? USC is the there's the many schools, Chapman's, et cetera, that are in the Los Angeles area, or if not those, why wouldn't you go to New York?
Maybe it was the furthest you could get away from LA without leaving the country. I don't know.
Honestly, Roger, I think
Roger.
that's no. I genuinely think that's actually exactly what was going on in my mind. I was probably like many other kids, 17, 18, 19, 20. Yeah, I probably had just too much angst in my own self and was angry at the world and wanted nothing to do with anything that was a sort of an established route towards anything. I remember even I think I must have been sort of around 20 when my mom realized I was interested in cinematography or thereabouts anyway, age-wise. And I was telling her the day I joined the ASC, the day my career is over, because I was so like anti everything that my mother's world stood for, because I was just angry, like so many kids are.
Yeah.
And so I think you're right, Roger. I think I did go to Florida because I just wanted to do something specific for myself, and I'm very thankful for it because it was that journey in Florida, in Tallahassee, Florida, brought me a lot of my, collaborators that I still collaborate with today and great friends.
Right.
And it was just a really special experience. I look back on that very fondly, actually.
What was the course like? Can you describe? I mean, how did you learn
And
Florida
what did
State?
you get from it?
Yeah, I think so. I wouldn't go as far to say it's a trade school, but it is a very hands-on program. And I think it still is today, if not more. So the day one, you're handed a Bolex with, film in it and said, you figure it out kind of a deal. All the kind of in-camera edits that you can sort of figure out and any sort of special effects you might be interested in trying to do, rewinding the film, double exposures, all that kind of stuff was my first months within the program, and then it continues from there, like a lot of other programs. But it's a film school in the sense of a more whether it's practical, I did have some film theory programs, and we did discuss all kinds of documentaries and foreign cinemas, etc. So I don't mean to imply it's a trade program, but it was more hands-on than maybe some other programs might be, and it was great for me.
I think that's great too, because I think that there are a lot of film schools that we've run across now where they don't, I don't know if it's because of budget or whatever, but they're not giving the kids the time on the equipment, which is the only way that you can learn is by blundering in there and make the mistakes, and then you never do it again.
It's interesting. I've never come across anything like the National Film School was when it opened. I went there the second year, and it was complete anarchy. I mean, basically, you were given a lot of money to make your own films or work with other students on their films, and you had to sort of convince the security guy in the camera department to give you a camera for a few days to shoot your film, and it was all about. I mean, I suppose it was a bit like the real world, really. Manipulation, I suppose. But it was not. I mean, they taught film history, and we discussed a lot of movies, old and contemporary. But then the main thing was this kind of sense of anarchy that you just go off and do it yourself. Learn by yourself, which I thought was really good.
That's largely how I would describe, my experience in some ways too. Yeah, it was very sort of, we had great professors and teachers. I don't want to dismiss that part of the education, but just that it was very much, take these tools and get out and try stuff. And what was great about that program that I really look back on fondly as well is everybody had to do every position. It really wasn't a specialized program. You couldn't major in directing, you couldn't major in producing. It was everybody. I did craft service as much as I shot films, for example, in that sense, which I thought was actually, it was not particularly enjoyable at the time, possibly, but I think looking back gave me a real sense of a bigger picture within what role I would play on a film set, and having an empathetic sense of what someone else might be dealing with, what department might be struggling with this, and even though I might be a cinematographer, what can I do to help their problem get solved in some way, which I think proved to serve me well, outside the program for sure. So that was another element of it that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, that's good. So you met Barry Jenkins there. He was a fellow student, right?
That's right. Yeah. So Barry Jenkins was my roommate in college. We became really close friends in that journey, and learned to make movies together more than anything else. And I think when I talk about working with Barry, a word I oftentimes use is dialect, and this, a certain way of speaking that I think we learn together, in the sense of when we're referencing movies, or really when we're looking at like how to expose film, we were watching the same references. How does the camera move? We were watching the same films in the evenings after class. So I think we started speaking in the same vernacular in some way, and I think that, I mean, certainly was the bedrock of that. Of course, was just the endless amounts of weekends, watching French cinema or, Asian cinema of some kind, and falling in love with certain filmmakers and obsessively watching their catalogs. And that time, I think we were sort of, unbeknownst to ourselves, probably, starting to learn to speak the same way, visually speaking. I mean, in what kind of films we want to make.
So who was there any filmmakers still, or
yeah, I mean, there's
countries film that really inspired both of you?
I mean, at the time, and probably still to this day to a certain point, we were obsessed with filmmakers like Wong Kar-wai. We were obsessed with Claire Denis, the French filmmaker. I think those two filmmakers probably more than others. But of course, I remember watching, a lot of Wes Anderson films. Sorry, not Wes Anderson, P.D. Anderson films with Barry, but Wes Anderson as well, possibly too. But I would say, probably more than any other filmmakers, it was, Wong Kar-wai and Claire Denis that we were really, really watching multiple viewings of the same films, et cetera, and things like that. So
and what was it that drew you to those filmmakers?
I think it was a sense of tone, probably. I mean, probably for different reasons. I should say, for Wong Kar-wai's work, I think we were really attracted to, for example, with Chungking Express or Days of Being Wild, the early Wong Kar-wai films. There was a sense of going out into a world that had full of energy and excitement and vibrant colors. And I think you can kind of see that work actually trending towards, and not trending towards, but sort of, alluding towards what we did with Moonlight, for example, sort of the vivaciousness of the color palettes, even though, of course, very, very different experiences and very different sort of, moods and settings, of course, but the sense of just getting out into these worlds and capturing them, I think in a way was probably, at least for me, but I think probably true for Barry as well. Again, Days of Being Wild and Chungking Express probably were very influential in that sense. And for Claire Denis, I think just there's a certain, it's not going to be harder for me to sort of verbalize probably, but there was a sense of a subtlety and a sort of a pacingness to the pace of her films and how they move, how the camera sort of wanders through scenes and settings. I think there was a sense of how she moved the camera, I think, for us that really was influential and inspiring. Yeah.
That was interesting because I can see that influence on the first film that we're aware of you did with Barry, which was Medicine for Melancholy, but it's almost black and white. So can you talk about that? How did that film come about? I mean, I guess you knew San Francisco, so you had a sort of quite a big influence on the locations of that.
Yeah. So I after school had moved back home largely, and Barry was living in LA for a period of time, but then moved to Oakland, California. And so, but at that point, this would have been, I'm guessing, 3 or 4 years after we graduated school, and neither one of us had really felt like we, we're going to get, no one was going to give us the chance to do much at this point, and rightfully so. I mean, to be perfectly honest, we were sort of 25-year-old kids or 26-year-old kids. And at that point in one's life, I think you probably start to realize you're on your own a bit, and you're not really going to get much help on some level. You've gone through a film school that was very supportive and people sort of giving you opportunities in some sense, but now you're in the real world and you have to sort of figure it out. And we probably felt amongst each other, but of course the filmmakers involved as well, our producers and others involved, all probably felt like we need to figure out how to, put out in the world what we're capable of doing and this kind of stories that we want to be telling in a way that if we just wait for someone to say, hey, what do you have for us? That moment's never going to happen. So we were lucky enough to find a way to scrounge up a few dollars. I think we ended up making the film for something around, I think, under $20,000. I sort of recently bought an HVX 200. If anybody remembers that camera, that was an early days sort of HD camera that had shot the ability to shoot 24p and things like that. And I had bought these Nikon lenses off of eBay for, I think, something like $150 of a set, a set for like 4 or 5 focal lengths, and one of these sort of spinning glass adapters called the Red Rocket, a Red Rocket adapter, sorry. And anyway, it was sort of a very funny looking camera. Looking back now, it's such a long camera, and it was good enough to make a film for, and it was probably the only way we were going to do it. And I think we kind of realized that if it's going to happen, it's going to happen now. I think we were also realizing too that there at the time, I want to say this would have been sort of circa 2007. Forgive me if I'm getting the dates wrong. 2008. I think we realized there was a trend happening. There wasn't a kind of filmmaking that necessarily felt like we were a part of, but there was a lot of these very small younger filmmakers coming up and giving it their shot. And some of these films were getting into film festivals in a way that was getting, it was exposure probably isn't the right word. I think it was just opportunity in the sense of audiences coming to, be interested in watching these kind of films. So I think we just sort of put our foot out there and gave it a shot. And that was Medicine for Melancholy. It premiered at South by Southwest, and then I think it went on to play Toronto and London Film Festival and others. And so I think it just gave us maybe a little bit too much, but some amount of, you guys have something and you should continue to try. And I think we tried for a few more years, and it took us a while, almost 10 years, but it was eight or so years later, had another chance to do Moonlight. But yeah, there was that early film of Medicine for Melancholy that was a foot in the door, I guess one could say. But I think more than that, also too, just a sense of it could be, easy isn't the right word. It could be this accessible. It doesn't need, you don't need the budget of Mufasa to make a film.
Right.
It's a little bit, it can be as complicated as that, and it can also be as simple as Medicine for Melancholy. And I think that's true for us.
So before you actually shot it, had you decided on that palette? The fact that it would be almost black and white, but certain things would pop out?
We did a test on it, because the camera was something that I owned. We did have it at the time in prep, so to speak, whatever you want to call it. I mean, prep with Barry is a pretty amorphic concept because we just started talking about projects years before we make them, and it doesn't really sort of lend itself towards a okay, you have 6 weeks to sort of figure this out. Let's just say the conversations sort of happen over the course of a long, long time, and so anyway, meaning to say, I can't remember how early we shot a test, but it was at least 4 or 5 weeks earlier, and I think it was during that test. It was these classic San Francisco foggy days. Palette was muted as it was already, just in terms of what the setting was and what the light was doing in the sky at the time. And I think it just sort of clicked in a way that this sort of gives a feeling of the city that I think both of us felt appropriate to. You could talk about, many people have talked about the reasons why we chose that palette specifically. And I think that, those might have been sort of subconscious possibly, but I think honestly, it just felt like it worked for the film. It worked for the tone and the setting we were trying to apply to the story we were telling. And honestly, I think that it seems maybe flippant to say, but in a way, that's how Barry and I approach so much of our choices. I think because we just have this sort of deep connection from knowing each other for so long, if it feels right, it probably is right. We can sort of circle back and pretend like we logically thought of a reason that theoretically worked for why the choice is made. But if we're being honest, a lot of our choices probably just sort of come from an intuition and a sense of a feeling.
But did you achieve it when you timed it afterwards, and then you chose certain colors to come out and certain colors to push down?
It's funny, if you look at the negative, if you want to call it that, of what the images were coming into camera at, I was rating the camera, and forgive me, I'm not going to remember the Kelvin temperature, but skin tones were really, really red. And for some reason, when I did that, it looked almost like a red, infrared film, kind of like that level of almost like tonal qualities were not, you could not separate skin tone. It was something that was just sort of a mush of red. And I realized when I took the color out, it gave the skin tone this really kind of I guess just a subtle softness. It was only picking up sort of red parts of one's skin tones. And it didn't necessarily come, for me, it felt like it lost detail, which for me was interesting. And I really enjoyed that sort of, I didn't really want it to look sharp. I mean, all the glass and, low resolution mirrors and things spinning in front of it anyway. But it was an attempt to sort of try to find something that felt nostalgic for us. I think, the city for me being, that's my hometown. And I think maybe the story we're telling felt like it wanted to have some sort of romance to it and a nostalgia to it. If people have seen the film, the main character, played by Wyatt Cenac, talks about sort of like what the city used to be like a lot, and his sort of growing up in the city, and sort of wanted to have this nostalgic quality to it. I think whether it was the lenses or whether it was this weird treatment we were doing with what the skin tones were looking like in the negative, it was all kind of about sort of pulling resolution out and pulling sharpness away.
I think it looked great. But you say you and Barry kind of work more instinctively, just if it feels right. How did you decide on where to shoot, and how did you shoot, and how did you decide on the shots and the way you shot it?
Yeah, so I think, Barry had been living in the Bay Area for at least probably a year and a half, if not more, somewhere around there. Anyway, a reason why I say that is just because he was so familiar with the city that by the time the script was written, he had written it to locations, really. I mean, and this is probably to point largely true for Moonlight as well, actually. Barry can correct me if I'm missing something specific, but I think, both of those films actually were written in a way where Barry knew exactly the location we were shooting them in the writing process. So that was sort of set in stone as we started to approach, what production might look like. And then going forward from there, I don't think we actually shot listed the film. I could be wrong about that, but I don't think we ever did. I think it was largely, a lot of things were discussed. I think if he had an idea for how a scene wanted to look, we definitely discussed what those pieces were. And I think a lot of it was based on just rambling discussions about what things might want to feel like, and then breaking down from there. So yeah, I think he was, working with Barry is sort of a funny one because it's really not, what's the right word? Sort of, it isn't, I guess it isn't traditional. It doesn't feel like it works with a sense of, in this week of prep, we're breaking down this portion of the script. In the second week of prep, we're doing this. It's really sort of amorphic and runs along sort of timelines that, again, just don't fit into like what I might be doing with a different filmmaker on a different prep schedule. So yeah, I think it makes it harder to sort of have these conversations, to be perfectly honest, because I don't really remember when some of these choices were made. It was sort of made, oftentimes with Barry, I'll reference something, maybe 6 months out of production, and then, he'll look at me and go like, I don't really understand that. It doesn't really make sense. And then, 4 months later, we'll have another conversation where he'll pick back up off that 6 month ago conversation. And that'll become the thing that happens. And I think it works for both of us. I oftentimes won't understand what he means either. And then I'll do my best at attempting it. And about 5 minutes into attempting it, I realize, oh, that's exactly what he means. So I say, sorry, of course. Yeah. And then we move forward from there. And so I think our relationship is much like that. Like, we both have so much trust in each other. And even if I don't understand maybe at the time what he might be referencing, I certainly am going to do my best. And usually 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10, just merely attempting it, I'll understand what he means, a few minutes into that attempt. And I imagine it goes both ways. I'm sure he doesn't understand what I'm referencing sometimes, but I think he certainly gives me a little bit of leash, and then he'll see where I'm going and realize, oh, I see how that fits into the structure of the scene. And he might give me a note that moves it a certain direction towards a different sort of thing. But, it's just the act of doing. And going back to the film school reference from a few minutes ago, we both very much, I think, come from the camp of just start trying and start doing and less talking. And if it isn't right away, it probably will be right about 20 minutes later. If you just sort of give it a try. Yeah.
Yeah, you referenced there's a very long time between Medicine for Melancholy and Moonlight. But I see your credit list. You shot a lot of movies in that interim period. How did you get work, and was it very different working with other people?
Yeah, I had to learn. I honestly probably had to learn again how to make films with a different sort of group of people, and I think that probably is true even today. As I sort of collaborate with different people, it's hard. I honestly struggle with it, to be perfectly honest, in the sense of everybody is so unique, and I love this business for that. It isn't conducive to, especially these days with production schedules wanting to squeeze prep time into some sort of very finite place, and oftentimes I'm not even getting a meeting on a project more than 3 weeks before, if I'm lucky, before it wants to start prep. And I struggle with that quite a lot, because I do genuinely attempt to try my best to fit into a director's vision. I don't know that I may be dense. It could be me. I don't know, but I don't really think it's possible to be to do that, to really get into someone's mind within some of these prep periods. And so, yeah. I still struggle with this, but yeah. So anyway, but going back to your question, I did do quite a number of films between Medicine, Melancholy, and Moonlight. To be honest, I mean, I was a little terrified because, Medicine, Melancholy had this festival run. IFC bought the film. It was getting some attention. And as a young guy that was trying to become a cinematographer, I was very excited. And I don't know if I've even told Barry this, but he was getting attention, as he rightfully, of course, was and should have, about film and doing films that were probably way out of my league. I was not going to be doing that second film, possibly. I don't mean to imply that it was ever said, or those films ever specifically happened in the way they were being discussed, but it was probably going to be hard for me to find my way onto those film sets. And I don't mean to imply by any means that these other films were just me, trying to learn more. I did want to do these films, but it was certainly a sense for me that I really needed to find a way to improve and to grow as a cinematographer, to gain experience, to learn more, and to just become a stronger DP. And so it was a stretch, and it was a lot of, I guess, what they call salad years. I didn't make any money, and I was, credit card debts were a little scary to look at and things like that. But I felt like, again, going back to this sort of, just got to get out there and try. I didn't think that I was going to be very good at assisting, for example. I didn't think I was going to be very good. I did actually join the union as a film loader. I did do that between these smaller films. But I was not, I'm sure there's some people that maybe I've worked with that can attest to this. I was pretty terrible.
That was probably a good thing. The same happened to me. I went out as an assistant once and completely screwed it up, and I hated it. And said, from then on, I said, no, I'm a cinematographer. And
I better be.
Yeah,
otherwise I'm not working.
So it was kind of a good thing, really.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether it was a sense of just my ego was crushed. I really realized I was making huge mistakes, and the only way I could justify my own self was to say I'm better than all of it, anyways. But anyway, it was somewhere in that spectrum, anyway. But I was terrible at it, and realized I really needed to sort of focus myself towards shooting. And if I wasn't going to do that, it was going to be bigger problems. So I sort of put my head down and just try to push myself as much as I could to pursue it, because I didn't know that I didn't think I had another option, to be perfectly frank. I don't know that there was no real B plan, to be honest.
Right. So how did you get work?
That's a great question. Yeah. So I think,
I just remember those times for myself, because I'd shot one film for a director who went on to do something bigger. And same as you, if I hadn't done something in between that had impressed the producers, I wouldn't have got that job. It's that kind of thing, isn't it?
Totally. It really, it's a scary place to be. I think, probably the truth is, so what I did, so Medicine, Melancholy, the premiere happened at South by Southwest. I went to the film festival. I did not go to Toronto, but I went to London Film Festival. And I would kind of try my best at sort of traveling with the movie in the way a director would. And I was certainly odd one out at many of these places. I don't think there were a lot of DPs that were doing this. And when I would try to introduce myself to a director or a producer, I get a lot of strange looks. And it was not necessarily, easy conversations to have, because I'm not a particularly outgoing person, and so attending these places, it was uncomfortable, and I probably wasn't doing a great job.
Yeah.
So anyway, but I did do it. I tried to sort of put myself out there in a way that I just thought if I just meet enough people, someone might call, and I think that probably was the truth. To a point, I should say. The sort of asterisk to that is the next film I shot, The Myth of the American Sleepover, was also a Florida State University film student as well. So I think it was a year or two later, I kind of got another bite at that same apple. It was a director that I didn't know from school. He was in the graduate program and I was in the undergraduate program. And I think he had graduated like the year earlier. So I didn't know him well, but I did have a connection to him and got an opportunity to try to do that film as well. And again, that film sort of, it premiered at Critics Week in Cannes, and then again, it did a festival run with that film as well. So I think the same thing happened in that sense. I also sort of tried to travel as much as I could with that film as well. By this point now, I was sort of meeting enough sort of people in that space of this, whether you call it, I guess, low budget independent American cinema sort of folks, that, I guess my name got around enough to where enough people would sort of give me a chance to interview for a project and whatnot. I'm trying to think of like what the next film was specifically, but yeah, I think a few of those sort of just relationships based on my name getting out there enough, and to a point where I was getting calls. And it's funny, the some other filmmakers that or cinematographers that I think are still shooting today that I'm huge fans of were also sort of in that same space. I don't know their stories to say, but I remember meeting Joby Lee Lipes at the Sarasota Film Festival during one of those runs, and I remember hearing Bradford Young's name quite a lot as well during that time. So there was a lot of people that I was watching their careers, go do really well, and was watching their journey, and I was thinking if I can just sort of keep up with them, so to speak. And I wasn't at the time. I don't mean to say I was, because I certainly wasn't, but I was sort of like in arm's reach of those people, and I was thinking they can do it. I can give it my shot as well.
Yeah.
So did all that interim time where you were shooting so many projects, I mean, independent cinema, did that give you a lot of confidence when Barry approached you, when you started talking with Barry about Moonlight then? Because Moonlight is you mentioned Wong Kar-wai. I mean, there's definitely connections, but there's some. It has a wonderful light approach to it. It's a wonderful. Well, is it the right word to say? It's an unpretentious sort of cinematography. I find so much of cinematography pretentious, but you could never say that about Moonlight. It seems effortless. But then we talked to Barry the other day, and it's like we said about the opening shot, for instance, which it looks incredibly complicated. The sort of dance of the camera with the actors. And he said, well, we just kind of worked it out on the day and James shot it. I think, well, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think that stems back from what I was referencing a little earlier, just sort of the intuitiveness of Barry and his sense of what feels his barometer for what is the true thing he's looking for, and what is maybe a little too pretentious, let's say, or a little too something else. His barometer towards knowing what is the thing he's looking for is pretty attuned. I wouldn't say pretty, is very attuned. He can sniff out what is bugging him actually quite technically. Barry does a good job in interviews to sound really a big theory guy. He's really quite technical as well. He knows what's going on. He's, very, very smart. And he's able to sort of, figure out what movement of the camera might not be, hitting the right tempo or whatever it might be, in a way that, it's very helpful for myself, for sure, to have that collaboration. But thank you. I mean, hearing how you describe Moonlight is as you might imagine, very flattering. It certainly was our goal. I think there's a sense from that, for me, for that film to ride this delicate balance of the lighting being something that feels, believable. I think, for me, lighting in my work wants to ride this fine line of, I do attempt, not always successful, to make sure that, I'm lighting faces in a way that is, maybe flattering at times or whatever it might be, but it does need to ring true for me. I can't, I really, it's bothersome for me when I find my lighting to slip too far into whether it's polished or to curate it in a way that makes me start to sort of question the believability of an image. It's my barometer where, like, if I don't believe the lighting could be possible in some sense, the scene can fall apart and the movie can fall apart, to be honest. And I find my role generally, but certainly working with Barry, to be sort of the barometer of that on the lighting side. You know, if something feels too, you know, sometimes he can be too soft in a sense, and the lighting feels like it's something, you know, that doesn't come from a place that is genuine for the scene. And I certainly appreciate your description, and it certainly was on my mind throughout the film to make sure that was what we're aiming for. I think when you make films like Moonlight, I think true for other films of Barry as well, the stakes are really high, actually. You're making movies about topics that people care deeply about, and if you make the wrong move, people don't forgive it very easily. I'll put it that way. So for Moonlight, but that's true for Beale Street and others going on. You know, the focus for us is to make sure that these images find their way into a sense of believability and a lack of curation. I oftentimes use that word as a in the pejorative sense. You know, I don't really want it to be something that looks like I've spent a lot of time on it. I don't particularly want it to, you know. Yeah. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think it was really impressive that you do these kind of quite complicated shots that connect characters together, and it must be, you know, quite intense scenes. But then other scenes you and Barry play it as like a simple 2-shot, and maybe you go in for close-ups, or maybe you don't. It's that sort of balance from scene to scene that I found so impressive. Anyway, you know,
formulaic.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to move the camera all the time.
Yeah. I was interested in what you were saying earlier about Florida State, being at film school and appreciating everybody else's sort of role on a film set, because you've kind of done these roles. But I've noticed with both, I mean, it's Barry and you, I've noticed, and it's you as well, because we saw this film called Anything, which is with the you shot, which is kind of wonderful. It's
incredible acting.
Yeah, so that was my point. Incredible performances. And so how do you feel your role is as a cinematographer relating to not only the other people on the crew, but especially the acting? And how does that really
allowing them?
You know, how do you allow something like Moonlight? I mean, it would be so. You could destroy it as a cinematographer if you were doing kind of like traditional kind of lighting and, you know, the traditional way of working. I think it would have been very hard to get those kind of, you know, those performances.
Gosh, I have such a reverence for actors, and I really deeply, deeply love them in a way that I guess I don't think I understand them in a way. So I find that I'm sort of in awe of them, to be perfectly honest, when I'm even when I'm working, you know, at this point, you know, a number of years in this industry. So when I'm connecting with them, I guess I just probably I tend to really try to do my best to listen, to be perfectly honest, especially when we're doing a blocking. And I like to think that if I'm listening enough and if I'm tuning myself into what I can hear in their voice, and sometimes honestly I'll close my eyes during the blocking, which is, I think, strange for a DP maybe to say. But what I'm trying to do is listen to them as much as I possibly can, because I'm trying to get a gauge about where in the scene there might be turning emotionally, where the turn is, where they are emphasizing in their performance. And I don't mean to imply that in a blocking they're giving what they're going to give on the shoot, on the day on the shoot, but just that it might be clues. And I guess what I mean when I say all those things is I'm just trying to get a sense of like where I might be tempo-wise moving the camera to or away, or a tracking, etc., that might be helpful to enunciate with them in a way that gives them a sense of punctuation. So I think, you know, I think that comes from a sense of love for people who are willing to step up with us and be in front of the camera and perform these characters. Yeah, I guess I'm in awe of them in a way that I find not only inspiring just theoretically, but inspiring quite practically. And I think a lot of my choices stem from something I see them doing. And I think that I probably did learn that from Barry. I think we're both quite reactive filmmakers in the sense of, I don't think this is going to sound ironic after making Mufasa, but I don't think we're like best at our work when we're asked, what do you want it to look like? What do you want to do? I think that exercise is helpful, certainly, but it isn't probably where our best work is, or my best work is anyway. My best work is probably when I'm witnessing something and I'm reacting to that thing by, thinking, okay, well, I can see them walking, across the room this way, and they pause here. Well, that means that I can bring the light from this window, and I can use that lamp over here to make a nice color contrast between the cool light through the window and the warm light this way. And in that moment, I can build this move to where I'm, stepping towards them in a certain moment within their performance, and I can sort of emphasize this beat that they're trying to punctuate for us. And I'm trying to think about all those things in a way that is hopefully doing its best to sort of be true to the scene we're sharing in the moment we're trying to capture.
There's one particular scene towards the end of Moonlight, which is in the restaurant, which is played in one kind of quite complicated, well, it looks kind of complicated if you analyze it, but in terms of blocking with the actors, it's one continuous shot. Can you talk about that? How did that evolve? And
it's one of my favorite shots. I can, it's one of those shots also that just really has stayed with me in my memory in a way that clearly for me means a lot. The irony of that shot is it's literally 3 sticks of 8-foot track parallel to the door.
Wow.
And we're just kind of countering the movement from one side to the other in a way that in that sort of pacing finds its rhythm towards revealing certain faces at certain moments, coming across from right to left as he walks down towards the counter, and then back left to right. And that's where we first see the Andre Holland, who's working at the restaurant, and then back left to right towards revealing what his facial reaction is as he sees this man for the first time in so many years. It's really funny. I think the technical part of the difficulty, that of course this was the tempo. The gear was something that probably every film school kid has, in their truck at all times. It's just about trying to work out with the cast and with the dolly grip.
Right.
The funny thing I think too is that we had a change of dolly grips on that job. Just we had a tricky time crew wise in Miami, making a tiny little movie that no one knew who we were, and that was the dolly grips. I think first day on the shop was that shot. So credit to him that because it's one of my favorite shots ever.
Was this shot? It's a beautiful shot, but was it worked out with a blocking rehearsal, or was it something that you kind of discovered actually during a take? Or
you're pressing my memory, but I'm pretty sure it was something that was discussed in the blocking rehearsal. Yeah, it was. I think we didn't. Right. I don't mean to imply that the precision of every choice, and this is probably true for Barry's and I's work a lot as well. There's probably an idea that is probably 65% sort of thought through in the decision about, where the track is laid. Right. And then some of these other nuanced choices about the timing will get figured out once we start to rehearse a little bit more.
Right. But it also seems like you operate, right? So
I do.
It feels like you're actually creating things with the camera actually at the time. It's not like this is what is storyboarded, it's exactly this frame and now we track left.
Yeah.
It feels like a little bit more, you're so in sync with the actors.
Yeah,
and that's like
actors go.
Yeah, it's like you working with your dolly grip in sync with the actors.
Yeah, definitely true. Yeah, so I do prefer to operate, and I did on that film, and I do as much as I possibly can. It's part of the job that I do feel, it just helps me, to be perfectly frank about it. The funny, what you're referencing is true for sure, in the sense of I think it drives our editors crazy. But take 1 looks nothing like take 2, looks nothing like take 3, looks nothing like take 4, because it's evolving constantly about where we're panning to what character, and I think it's I should say I recognize, and I don't mean to say Barry doesn't, because of course Barry does too, but I guess I feel badly sometimes, because I know in the sense of when we're making a decision to come off of a character to reveal another character, It also must drive our actors crazy because it might start as a close-up of a certain character, but it evolves during the course of a take to be someone else's shot. So it isn't a thing that you can just sort of say to your number one on the call sheet, this is your close-up, because it might start that way. It might not always be that way as we sort of move forward.
Yeah.
Right. But it's interesting though, isn't it? Because sometimes you do a continuous shot like that, and the actors kind of appreciate that you keep going within the scene.
I hope they do. Yeah,
kind of break it up.
I think that I do think they do. I think I think they probably appreciate it more than they don't, especially as productions continue. Maybe the first week we're getting to know each other, and take week 2, it's a bit more fleshed out. By the time we're really in our sync with each other, I think they all recognize that this is an evolving process. That if you have something to give, if I'm operating and I'm realizing that maybe a character that isn't sort of discussed being in the scene, in the shots, I should say, sorry, on this take, but we can sort of feel that they are starting to deliver something. The camera may find you. And just, again, going back to that listening thing about being really in tune and aware and not just sort of, okay, this is the medium close-up, take 7, but to actually just be in touch with the performances that are going on around you. Great stuff is found that way, I think.
So to that point, though, did you have a lot of prep time with the actors? I mean, in terms of getting to know actors, it's always difficult if you. I mean, it used to be we shoot film and you would do a costume and makeup test, and that was your time to get to know the actors. Maybe it was the only time, but at least it was something,
Yeah, I mean, that what you're describing is probably just that's been true for me. Just that one day of prep with them, and man, I should also say that's not always true. Actually, now that I'm going back and thinking about it, sometimes I am invited into the rehearsal process occasionally. I don't mean certainly not into the first day of rehearsal. I don't mean to imply that, but just that once the directors are starting to get a sense of the shape of scenes they're rehearsing together. Yeah, I have been invited into those spaces, which is incredibly lucky and very, very appreciated, because I certainly don't make comment within those spaces. It's not my place to start to discuss, give a note here or there. But it is a place for me to start to listen and to gain a sense of where the director might be headed performance-wise. And it just helps me wrap my head around what choices I can make to be helpful in that space, for sure. But yeah, I would say that if I'm lucky to have that time, it's a day or two at most. I don't mean to imply that, I'm there for weeks with them. But for me, I think usually a day or two of that. And if I'm lucky, and then certainly, yes, the costume and hair, makeup, wardrobe test. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask something about anything.
I think
thank you.
You basically did anything after Moonlight.
Yeah.
And anything is incredibly colorful. I mean, there's just so much color in it. Was this something that was discussed in prep and planned out? Did you know going into it? And also, because the production design is very colorful.
Yeah.
It has a kind of look of a kind of Kodachrome reversal, that kind of heightened saturation.
Yeah. Well, as you might guess, I love colorful scenes. I do love colorful colors. I'm attracted to boldness in color palettes generally. Laughingly only to reference the Menace of Melancholy discussion we had earlier. But
right.
But in absence of that, I tend to sort of push color in the grade and in capture as well, I should say, too, as much as I can to use it as a storytelling element, largely an emotional one. I'm team sort of, films should be like Hitchcock. I'm paraphrasing. I'm not going to get that quote right, but just movies are what life without the boring parts cut out. I'm on that team generally, and so I want to portray stories in ways that are, yes, driven by some sort of element of truth, but certainly pushing the envelope towards a sense of whether it be sensuality or humor or drama. Pushing a little further. And I think anything certainly sort of goes hand in hand with that. The choices we were making wanted to, much like Moonlight, be truthful as much as we could towards the story we're telling. I mean, again, the topic of anything is something of a topic that is sensitive and nuanced. And I mean, part of an aspect of our lives that goes undiscussed and not touched upon. So I don't want to sort of be too bold with some of these choices about how colorful things are, but I did want to make sure that we weren't telling the story about these characters in a way that was just going to be the life pulled out of it. I didn't want that. I wanted to make sure that these characters felt felt loved and felt taken care of in a way by the photography that made sure the audiences also felt like these characters can be loved and can have love to share in a way. So I think those things were on my mind quite a bit towards that film, and I wanted to make sure that that story,
which definitely
thank you, I appreciate
fits
it
with the story.
yeah.
And were the apartments, were they locations and not sets?
They were, correct.
They were tiny.
Tiny little places, correct, exactly.
How did you do
that?
that?
Was Los Angeles. That was sort of like, whether it was Koreatown or East Hollywood generally. I not exactly remembering the address specifically, but that's, the movie takes place in that part of the city, and we shot in that part of the city. Again, trying to make sure that we were, being as truthful as we could with some of these elements of the story. But tiny little places. And I tend to, again, I guess I like that stuff. I know there's a tendency and a truthfulness to this idea of when you build sets, you build them bigger and shoot them smaller, giving room for the dollies and the lights and things like that. And I don't mean to imply that that's not true, because of course it is true. But there's something to be said for being stuck in a corner that I think audiences actually, I also feel like audiences are really smart these days. I think we're all pretty knowledgeable about how photographs are taken at this point. I don't think there's a lot of mystery to it, in the sense of,
really.
that we know there's a lens that can capture this field of view, because we have, cameras in our phones every day. We're pretty nuanced in that way. So if I'm doing a 2-shot that's pulled back on a telephoto lens on 100 mil or whatever you might select, because I have the room in the set to go back that far, and I want to make a nice separation between our cast and the background, it might look nice, but I don't know that it might not feel very appropriate. And so I tend to believe that audiences these days can sniff that out, actually. I remember writing down in my notebook in film school after watching Spike Jonze's adaptation, which I remember watching again and again, and I love that film quite a lot, and about like how much Lance Accord had blown the windows out in a certain car scene and overexposed the windows in a way that you could tell there wasn't any information in there at all. It felt that way to me at the time anyway. And I loved that. That wouldn't have been how anyone would have photographed a car scene in the 1960s or 1950s, obviously.
All right.
I think it only probably worked well because I think Lance and Spike have a sense that audiences can, again, they know they know it felt real to them in a way that they probably felt like.
Feels like.
So I guess I'm also on that team as well, in the sense of like with anything, being stuck in small apartment hallways in Los Angeles helped the way we photographed the film. Actually, I don't know, it would have worked very well the other way around.
You must like working with small crews too, because there's nothing worse than being in a small location with a huge crew. Where you're falling over one another.
No, I mean, I'm sighing because I know exactly what that feels like, unfortunately. And and it's true. I do. I like a small set. I like car scenes because I like getting stuck in the corner with a car. Finding some strange yoga position to put myself in this place that like feels uncomfortable physically, but I do tend to feel like it makes a difference in the capturing of those scenes in a way that just can ring true. Let's just say, I guess, for me.
And then you've recently done Mufasa, which is so different.
We're jumping past Beale Street and Underground Railway, but it's really interesting to go from like Moonlight and anything to
anything. What was that experience like? Because we've done some animation and it was a bit of a learning experience because it's a different for what we were working on, a different world.
As you described, the antithesis of everything I've ever done before, and had to relearn what the job was, and had to learn a brand new tool set, and try to figure out how to still maintain a sense of personal voice within the images we were trying to create. And you know, do I have frustrations and do I have lots of comments about how things work? Of course, but I genuinely did actually enjoy myself on the making that film and felt like a better filmmaker coming out of it. And that was something on my mind, funny enough, even going into prep on that project was I feel like I'll be a better filmmaker after this film than I am now. You know, because I think what was so true for that process was I had to verbally communicate to whatever degree I could the characteristics of a certain lens flare and how the sun would, you know, a veiling flare or how you know a texture in the shadow might render, and having to sort of go into meetings about how and have to figure out how to actually verbally describe that as opposed to just going into X camera house and saying, okay, I know how these super speeds work and I know how these, you know, whatever lenses function like these in the settings. And I can sort of just have an intuitive decision about, oh, that'll work well for the project. I feel right about that choice. This was every frame had to be discussed in a way that it was not easy, but I actually really, really deeply enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, we actually enjoyed our involvement in on animated films. But I talking to Barry, it was kind of interesting how you brought your own sensibility of how you construct shots. I mean, animation basically does a kind of a story reel, like an animated storyboard, and that's it. It gradually gets more finessed. But I think you did much more with a kind of camera capture system, did you not?
That's right. Yeah. So we worked in the way a lot of where Caleb Deschanel left off on The Lion King in 2019. We sort of picked up from there on Mufasa, you know, a number of years later. You know, learning a lot from that experience with Caleb, and also gleaning a lot of experience from how Avatar was made as well. You know, it's actually quite a small select group of people that do these movies, and so a lot of the people that worked on Avatar has worked on The Lion King in 2019, worked on Mufasa with us more recently. So I learned a lot from all these people. And yes, but you're right. I do the way those cameras were recorded was, if not entirely, 99% myself holding what is largely like a director's onboard monitor with sort of grips on the side and buttons on the side that change lenses and boom up and boom down. And I would walk around largely an empty soundstage with motion capture cameras in the ceiling and tracking my motions as I sort of would play back the animation in the monitor that I was holding and sort of walking the camera moves. And I would sort of say, okay, well, action. And I'd do it for pushing. I would just push in and I would ask the team to then take my steps out and make it a linear move from A to B so that it's a bit more precise. Or a lot of the work in the film feels very fluid and the movements are maybe more akin to Steadicam-ish kind of feeling. And again, that was just me walking around these spaces and asking to take my steps out largely. And in not all of them, I kind of kept some of them in to make it feel like, I think Barry really wanted it, and I did too, to make it feel like there was an operator behind the camera. We didn't really want it to feel like it was too precise. And we wanted to keep in some mistakes. There's plenty of like times where I'm cropping that head and the frame is sort of meandering in a way that is not correct, but we left them in hopes that it felt a little bit more intuitive and a little bit more connective, which I think, you know, was interesting to see. But yeah, that's the largely, you can do that process 1,000 ways. Caleb, I think, did it with a bit more tools on the stage floor. I think he brought in some cranes and some dollies and some practical things that helped him through his process. I tended to largely just sort of be handheld. I sort of liked the speed by which that could happen. I think Barry and I both really enjoy how when we're moving fast, what comes about. I think both of us get quite annoyed when things are going slow. And it isn't to do with someone not doing a good job.
Yeah.
But there's a creativity to the speed that we work, a tempo that we work on set, that we both feel inspires us to push things further and further or bring things back in a certain way that we both think really helps us. So for me to have this handheld device and iterate really, really quickly, for us just felt like a tool that was really helpful, as opposed to, bringing in live action tools to the space and just dialing in the speed that way felt like interesting, but less repetitive and less repetitions might actually hinder some more creative process that we wanted to take advantage of.
Right. I think it's a really interesting blend, though. It's because what you're shooting isn't exactly what's going to appear in the final film. So you can say, well, this is the shot, but I want it to feel like a track, or I want to feel like a zoom.
Yeah.
You can marry the two disciplines, so your handheld operating on Moonlight with a computer animation in a more traditional sense. I think that's quite brilliant. We had a little bit of experience with camera capture volume, where you kind of walk around an empty space, but actually you're looking at a monitor with the actors and the whole set.
Yeah,
and
the actors. And
it's kind of really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I think going back to my actor discussion, I did miss the actors. I mean, in those spaces, there's a sense of like anything's possible, which is good and bad. But then there's a sense that like it was quite a lonely experience. You know what I mean? Like when we're shooting days, literally there's about 5 people in the room and it's all quiet and it's a big gray wall that you're looking at. And I missed, I can hear the actors' voices and I'm trying to sort of find a way to connect with them through this audio experience. But anyway, I did miss that. That's one thing I did certainly miss.
It's funny. Yeah, there's 5 people in the room doing the shot, but there's like 500 people elsewhere doing all the animation and the texturing and
and so we made the movie in Unreal Engine, and that sort of was what was that I made. I'm referencing the shoot part of it all. And you're right, exactly. So that is put together, and then that's cut, and then that's shipped off to people who do all this sort of fine-tuned, beautiful, gorgeous, sort of realistic thing. And exactly, if you can watch the credits, it's just an endless scroll of so many incredible artists that did such a great job.
Incredible.
It's pretty wild. You're right.
Other ideas, other techniques and ideas you learned doing The Lion King, I mean, that you would bring back now to live action? And how do you see the two disciplines kind of going forward? How are they going to become more integrated? I mean, obviously in the big Marvel movies, they're becoming the same thing, aren't they?
Yeah.
But in the world you work in, a much more sort of actor-driven world you work in, how do you feel it's going to impact you?
Yeah, I think good and bad, like all technology, has this sort of like Jekyll and Hyde sort of thing to it all. I think the things I learned, I would say I learned about scope in a different way. I think I've never done a film with helicopter shots and huge sort of, flying down valleys to introduce characters and things like that. So I think I really enjoyed that challenge. I really felt like it was all kinds of things, but it was inspiring. It was everything. But I think, learning from that and taking back to the live action set of it all, or the small intimate projects of it all, I would say that, the technology that I would be most excited about using would be how to prepare more in prep and how to explore spaces in the prep process, whether that's building sets in Unreal and then exploring them with virtual cameras, where lights go to help communicate with teams. I think that's a really sort of valuable tool. I don't know that I'm not, I think that my guess where the future is going with some of these things is I think there's going to be, in a great way. I mean, I'll say this in a positive way. Just there's going to be different kinds of movies. There's going to be movies like Mufasa, as there are today, just as much as there are going to be these little small things. And the small things I don't feel personally like they will, I don't get the impression like those will end. I don't get the impression that the finances of how accessible this sort of digital filmmaking, I say that when I'm saying digital filmmaking, what I'm referencing is the Unreal Engine animation space. It's not very cheap, particularly. And so I don't get the sense that that's going to take over some other aspect for a long, long time about what films can do. I might get in trouble for saying this, but I don't know that I thought Mufasa looks real, particularly. I'm not sure Barry will particularly enjoy me saying that, but I don't know that it looks real. I don't think it is that. And I don't necessarily think those films that use this technology should be spoken about that way. I'm certainly very proud of the film. I don't mean to besmirch it. And that's not what I'm trying to say, but just the idea that do these images conjure a sense of reality for me? Not particularly. Very exciting, and I think it's incredible what they do. So it's not about me saying poo-pooing it in the slightest at all. I mean, I'm, again, a fan and very proud of what we did, but I don't personally get the sense that like it's taking away from another part of filmmaking yet. I kind of don't see it for a while. I may be, call me crazy, and maybe I'm ignorant to something that others are not. But you know, I still feel like there's a future for you know, smaller films, let's just say, or filmmaking in a more sort of historic sense.
But if you and Barry were to go back and do Underground Railroad again, knowing what you know now, would that have impacted the way you did that series, that TV series?
Again, I guess the only thing I would say is it would impact like my communication with my crew. I think it would impact my prep process. And again, maybe this is my sort of childlike, you know, brain, but I kind of would like to think that it wouldn't influence the creative choices. I think there's a sense of that I think where Barry and I's filmmaking process comes from is a physical one, is one that only functions when we're physically there with the characters, with the actors, with the set, with the lights, you know, and cameras and lenses, et cetera. I don't know that that can exist in a vacuum in the way that Mufasa functions.
But you could be there physically with the actors on a partial set, but you could actually light the scene afterwards and put in the backgrounds afterwards. You know, I mean, in the future. I mean, you can now light it. It's very expensive if you want to do it that way. But do you see that as a technique in the future? A possibility?
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess I would have to sort of find a way to divorce myself from the moment of capture in a way that I'm not totally sure I can. I could try, but I guess I just mean to say, like, there's something so finite and exciting about the choices one makes on set. And you know, maybe I could be eating my words here because you know, the DI is a space that I also really enjoy, and of course I'm changing all kinds of things in that space as well. But there is a sense of creativity and process to a live action set that you're right. I could sort of go back afterwards, I guess, if it was captured in a way, and what choices I would make after that would be interesting to sort of to understand. Sorry, I should say that the reason why maybe I feel this way is I don't think, with the exception of maybe a couple shots within Mufasa, and these were maybe, I should say, shots, more scenes, and these were more because in the edit there was a reordering of some scenes that caused some scenes to become, that were shot for midday, became twilight, became night, etc. But with the exception of those kind of things, I think that like where I put the sun in Unreal and the contrast ratios generally that I chose in the pre-lights, I don't know that I changed them ever, with the exception of the story-driven ones. You know what I mean? So, and that could have been, I could, maybe it's a tool set that I didn't use because of ignorance, but I also would like to think it's because I felt like I made the right ones in the right time.
Yeah, you put them in the right place.
You know, and I think that like there's some naivete to that. But again, going back to some just sort of philosophical thoughts, I have a feeling that when you make those choices that come from an instinctual place, and if that instinct is right, and if you believe in your instincts, because I think, you know, if you're in this industry long, I mean, you know, I hope to have a career as long as you guys do have had, and I'd like to think that if you do this with the length that even I have done it for, I have no choice but to believe in my instincts. I think that's kind of all I have, to be perfectly honest. You know, if I don't have that,
I'm totally with you there. I totally agree with you there. I think if you give away your instincts, you're lost, actually. I mean, I think so much of it is...
It's also not as much fun.
True.
Yeah, it's more fun.
I mean, to sleep. If I went home every night and you know, just spent the nights thinking about what I should have done differently, and of course we all do that to a point. But if I did that every single day, I would need to be medicated. I mean, I don't think I would be survived.
Well, yeah, but it's like going. You know, the other day we did a retransfer of a movie. What did we do the other day?
Hail Caesar.
Hail Caesar.
Oh, amazing.
And then you kind of look at it and think, well, with the technology we have, I could relight it, really. You know what I mean? If I didn't like a scene now, I could actually redo it. But
you didn't.
You wouldn't, because that was your instinct
and
at
that
the
was
time.
the moment.
It's the moment. Yeah. You
Yeah,
would
and what
destroy it.
what the
Anyway.
sun was doing on the day, and what the clouds were doing, and inconsistencies in scenes that you want to, I often fight in the DI about like, well, I want to try to push this take in a different place because the clouds came over or whatever it might have been, or I told the AD we should have been wrapped by now, but they're still shooting, whatever it might be. But there's something, I think, intangibly truthful about the mistakes that end up actually audiences. I think, again, and again, I apologize for getting even more theoretical here, but I actually think that the mistakes help audiences because, much like reading a book, if your audience is doing more work in their minds towards having to put things together, and they have to sort of do the mental gymnastics to make scenes consistent in their mind, even though, of course, they technically are not. I actually think that helps audiences, bizarrely, because it makes them have to engage in the story in a way that they otherwise might not have to be. It kind of, a better example is like early days special effects don't look real particularly, I would say. And the new stuff can look incredible technically, but in a bizarre way, I find some of the old stuff, the older films, having a bigger impact. And I kind of think it's something to do with my mind having to do the work to make that monster mentally feel real, even though it looks much more, let's say, fake, let's just say. And anyway, so I also kind of believe a bit of that too, that some of these mistakes actually help audiences strangely, as opposed to hurt them.
I think it's often, though, that the stories are being told in a better way. I mean, there's a famous example is Jean-Pierre Melville's effects work on Army of the Shadows, which is really crude, little toy planes flying across the channel at night. I mean, it looked awful. But he said, why would I spend money on that?
And
I'm telling a story. I only need to tell the story. I don't need to create something that looks... Yeah,
that's true.
I think you're absolutely right. I think if the story is being told with an honesty and a kind of passion, then an audience is going to accept.
Yeah. No, I agree.
We'll end on that.
Wow,
that's great.
Well, thank you.
That's great.
Just really great talking to you.
Yeah.
Really great. I'm
Thank you.
just so fascinated by your career. Going, and going into the really high-end animation and being part of kind of a wonderful, different kind of filmmaking. It's really interesting.
Well, it's very flattering to hear that from the two of you. And, just like everyone that comes on these shows, just huge fans of everything you guys have done. It's been such a privilege to watch the things you guys have created together. It's shaped so many people's lives, and it's incredible, obviously.
Yeah, this is crazy. I mean, this is crazy that we do this, but it's kind of wonderful. I mean, because we haven't talked to you before. I mean, it's just great.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. No, I feel very lucky.
Really
feel really lucky to be in the position I am in, and it's an incredible business to be in. It's such a bizarre circus. I love it. Obviously, it's the people that work in it are gems for sure.
Yeah,
and it's great that you have such a great partner in Barry.
Yeah,
and because you know that you can always go back to that and enjoy it. Because sometimes it can be rough in this business.
It can be tough. Yeah,
it can be awful.
It's good.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
No,
we won't go into those moments. There's enough of them.
It's true.
I know.
Well, thank you again. I appreciate it.
Great.
So anyway, thank you for doing this.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
We look forward to see what you do next.
Thank you.
If you'd like to sponsor the Team Deakins podcast, let us know at pod@teamdeakins.com. Thanks for listening. If you want more information and further discussion, check out the forums at www.rogerdeakins.com. Becoming a member is free, and you can ask follow-up questions there. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast for more new questions and topics. Also, check us out on Instagram at team.deakins. See you next time.